The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
We're live. Whatever you say here going forward is on the podcast.
I assume everything I say is live.
Nic Hallett's being recorded wherever he goes at all times. Welcome to the Minnesota Soccer Podcast. I'm David Naylor. I'm in Iowa. I'm not in studio.
I'm also doing
Tom, I think.
I'm also doing my Tony Romo impression wherever possible.
I don't know, Tom. I don't know if you saw that yesterday, but Nic Hallett did directly compare himself to Tony Romo to me in the press box.
You know, listen. Normally, I think that's absurd. That's just absurd. But Nic Hallett's really, driven up the ranks. If he's Tony Romo, who are you, David Naylor? Jason Witten,
Jim Nance. Given I'm Tony Romo.
Yeah. Good call.
Yeah, because the exact comparison was watching a game with Nick is like watching a game with Tony Romo on the commentary.
Are you calling plays?
Because I was enlightening, and he brings you all the knowledge that you've never seen before.
There was a couple plays where I just predicted exactly what would happen before it happened. So then, really, even looks wise, people are like Tony Romo. That's a good one. No, it's but if you've ever have you ever watched a Romo broadcast on CBS? I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, no,
what he
is
does.
crazy.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
He's at another level.
Yep. So that was part of what happened at TCF Bank Stadium yesterday. Is Nic Hallett? Nic Hallett knows exactly how good he is at reading soccer games, and besides that, Minnesota United won a game against the team they were supposed to beat, and it was great.
It was a tale of two halves.
Tom, did you get a chance to watch this game?
I did. You said a tale of two halves. I saw two late scoring chances, right, for United?
Yeah, well, yeah. So,
first.
we could almost, the way it panned out, tale of two halves is an easy cliche to say, but really it was a tale of the first 30 minutes versus the last 60 minutes of a 90-minute game. The first 30, and the guys, I think both players and Heath said after the game, that was some of the worst 30. That might have been the worst 30 minutes we've ever played,
especially at home, right? Where you're supposed to be jacked up.
And especially against one of the worst teams in the league. But after that, and I think David pointed out really astutely in his write-up on ZoneCoverage.com, is that it was really after. Luckily for United, it was so hot there was a mandated water break, and so it was after that water break, which encompassed having a quick little huddle.
Yeah,
that's when they turned it around. So Heath. Obviously, and that's why I gave Heath a high player or a high rating in the player ratings after the game. Obviously, a manager rating in his case, because clearly his worth at the water break and then again at the half really did their job, because that's when United looked their best, created chances, and eventually finished off their chances to get the win at the end.
Heath's quote about the water break was, "I'm not sure it was words of wisdom. There were a few words he probably wouldn't wish to repeat."
I really have come to just love him.
He's awesome.
Yeah.
He's good stuff. I feel bad because I don't know about you, David. I know you've only been. It's been you're still quarter of a season into covering the team up close and personal. But it's such a bummer sometimes because the assorted media has to take his press conferences so seriously after games. But he'll drop in at least 2, if not 3, solid jokes.
I'd be laughing in the back.
But people can't gotta hold that poker face a little bit because they gotta focus and ask good questions. But he drops good lines, and I feel bad because you have to take it serious sometimes.
Yeah, man. It's clear everybody in the room that knows him pretty well knows that that's who Adrian Heath is, and that's how you're getting it. And it's just he's a dude that there aren't necessarily every coach or manager that I would want to sit down and have a beer with and just do that. But I would love to sit and have a beer with Adrian Heath and just crack jokes because he seems like a great, fun dude to do that with. In addition to a pretty decent manager.
Seriously. How fun would it be to like that John Gruden show on ESPN when he sits down with the draft picks?
Grinder.
And they no, that's not what it's called.
That's not. No, you're right. You're right. What is that?
I don't know, but fair enough.
It's a sandwich, Tom. It's probably a sandwich at some bar in John Gruden's hometown.
Also that. But no. So Gruden sits down with those draft prospects, normally quarterbacks, and he breaks down film with them.
Yeah.
How fun would it be to do that with Adrian Heath? That would be a riot. He would be so
that'd be
insightful,
good.
and it would be just fun.
So let's talk about the game. The first 30 minutes were crap, and they keep doing this. It feels like we talk about this every week. This one was particularly bad because of the quality of opponent they were against, and the fact that they didn't give up an early goal is they certainly could have. I know Ignacio Piatti had a shot go off the crossbar at 27 minutes into the game, which was a really nice chance. And Piatti, we knew going in, was Montreal's danger man. And I don't know what it was that it was largely on the midfield and forwards that just didn't wake up and come into the game.
I mean, talk about a situation of, so many, there's a few, every game there's a few game-changing moments, a few, X-factor moments, and just so many pro games, right? The margin of victory is so small. Talk about a changing play, a game-changing play. They come out flat. Minnesota United's well known for allowing early goals far too often and really putting themselves in a hole. Piatti in a perfect situation to do that, punish them, and United really escapes because it hits the crossbar. This is right. If that goes underneath the crossbar and it's in, we're talking about them getting extra frazzled. Why are we not playing well? And now we're behind one, and that game could go a completely different way. I mean, talk about a huge, huge break that hits the crossbar.
Yeah, and then the water break comes right after that, and then United turn it on a little bit after the water break. Tom talked about the two chances right before halftime. In particular, Alexi Gomez hit the post after a game in which Nick and I were both very unimpressed with how he'd been playing to that point.
Yes. That came from nothing.
He was not good.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the kind of the turning point. Is Montreal had their time on top for a lot of that first half. You enter halftime, United have probably the two best scoring chances of the half, have equal possession on the balance of play, and Montreal didn't score a goal. And as Adrian Heath is famous for saying, goals change games. Montreal didn't get one, and then Minnesota were ready for him once it came out of the second half. Yeah. Well, I thought you were going to go a certain way with that, but then you went a different way. But what I would say about Alexi Gomez's chance is that's kind of the signs that he's shown at times that he has that in his locker, and that's why he's going to continue to play. But it's just a matter of whether or not he can bring consistency. And he did in the second half, and I was glad to see Heath allude to that, because Heath was very transparent. Was basically said at the post game press conference that Alexi played poorly in the first half, played much better in the second half, and I think we discussed that as much. But I mean, this is the United team that you would expect to see late in the first half and then in the second half, and I think it's in no small credit to what having a certain Ibson back in the lineup. And it's really interesting to think what Minnesota United is going to have to do going forward from a roster acquisition standpoint, because they need a center mid that has that quality, and it's so evident over the course of these last two games, and it's just a wonder of how they're going to replace that, because Ibson's not going to be around for much longer. He's far too old for that to be the case.
And that's kind of the question. If we point to the goals, Ibson's contributions were good in the game, and it was very good to have him back. Even though I remember his first contribution of the game was some kind of hilarious run and turnover that was very Ibson in nature. But I want to talk about Miguel Ibarra, because I said to Nick at some point in this game, I wonder how close Miguel Ibarra is to a U.S. national team call-up, because the form that he's in right now is just unreal. He's scoring goals. He's creating opportunities for other people. His chemistry with Christian Ramirez, which has been built for years, is clear to see. Nick had a great angle of questioning for Christian about the first goal, which was created from a turnover but that Ibarra found and went right for Christian. And I'm wondering, how long can Ibarra keep this up? Is this a permanent thing for him?
It's a really good question, because he hasn't been able to show that consistency, but until this point, this is the most consistent he's ever been at the top flight in his career. He showed, as we've talked about numerous times on past shows, or anyone who's followed the team for a while knows, he was the MVP of the second division, and you don't get that by accident. And then he went to Mexico, and obviously that didn't go quite as planned, didn't play that much. And then he comes back to the team last year, and again, he shows flashes, scores a few nice goals here and there, gets a few assists here and there, but on the whole kind of struggles to provide a consistent impact and struggles to stay on the field. Doesn't necessarily earn, starters minutes last year. Doesn't even, plenty of games where there are a few games where he didn't feature. So this is far and away his best form he's had in the top flight, and it's great to see. And it shows. What I think so much of it is that he's had to learn to play as a different style. When he was in the second division, he could run past people at a lot more regularity, and it's just clear. There's separation between the first division and the second division in any country for good reason, and I think speed is obviously one of those things. And he's had to learn that I can't use my speed in the same way anymore, and I think that's what he's come to grips with, and that's a huge reason he's been able to move into the top level play he's had lately. I think it is just a quick note. It should be pointed out that it was Ibson who assisted Ramirez's goal.
Right.
And nonetheless,
names, they're hard.
Yeah, right. All those last names that start with I. And so. The same thing. Actually, Christian has really good chemistry with both those guys. So it's a point that's helped Miguel have the good form that he's had, and it's helped. It shows the upside again moving forward that this offense could have, because as Ramirez said to us post game, Ibson has set him up like that numerous times, and so. He anticipated that ball was coming in, which allowed him to finish that and give United their first goal. And again, Miguel and Christian have played together a lot, and they're great friends. So I think that's really helped Miguel, and it's one of the reasons Miguel's form, from your original question, why Miguel's form can be sustainable is he's doing all this. And Ramirez hasn't even played that well this season. And if Ramirez starts to play well, that's gonna affect everyone in a great way.
And the corrected point about how it was Ibson that hit the pass to Ramirez, which is my mistake, still is a point out to Ramirez that, as we talked about with Ramirez numerous times, that he's still learning the games of the midfield three that is feeding him. And the closer he gets to getting that exactly right, the more familiar he gets, the more he's going to sense those runs, and the more things are going to make sense. We saw a few moments in this game where, whether it was Quintero or Gomez or Ibarra, there were passes that were made to runs that didn't happen, or a run would happen and the pass wouldn't come.
Yes,
it's that kind of knowledge and just instinctual knowledge that the team is still building up that Ibson has with Ramirez, but Ramirez doesn't have with everybody else yet.
That's a perfect example, because exactly that play, that first goal, and maybe the most crucial goal of this game happens because Ibson knows exactly where Christian's going to be, because they've played with each other for 2.5 years, and Christian knows exactly where that ball is coming from and when it's coming, because they've played together for 2.5 years, and they know each other and they understand each other's movement, and that is not what Darwin Quintero has with most of this team yet. And they've already he's proven obviously to be very effective. So it is just such a wonder. It's going to be fascinating what happens when those things start to click and they all do start to understand each other's movement even better.
And that was, in some regards, the satisfying thing about this game is Minnesota United win this game relatively comfortably, and Darwin Quintero didn't play that well.
Yes, and that's what I wrote. That's what I wrote in the player ratings on ZoneCoverage.com. Is that's to me the largest positive to take out of this from a United perspective is that I really felt that was one of Quintero's worst games for the Loons, and they won pretty handily without him once they turned things around after the first 30 minutes, and they didn't need him to do much.
Your interesting stat from the game in regards to Quintero is of the 12 outfield players that appeared in this game for Minnesota United, Darwin Quintero had the lowest passing accuracy of any of them at 71.9%.
Exactly. Boom. That's exactly.
The numbers back it up, and it's an interesting stat.
Yeah, and I think it's, again, on one level it backs up my the point that I'm making exactly, right? My point that they win without Quintero pulling the strings. But it's also, on the flip side, you can always argue that his passing accuracy will always be subject to extra difficulty because of the positions he has to be put in to make his passes. That's the cross to bear for that position as the attacking mid. So
that's fair. And then you can look at the three attacking mids, though. Quintero at 71.9%, Gomez at 81.8%, and Miguel Ibarra at 89.5% on the game. As we talk about his exceptional form right now, that's a great example of what he needs to do, though. Like, because of his skill set, right? It's perfect. It's perfect that Alexi Gomez is on the other side, because Alexi Gomez provides kind of the opposite. His top-notch speed gets past people. His dribbling gets past people regularly when he does it well. And Ibarra can't do either of those things. So therefore, Ibarra always is going to have his passing accuracy be that high for United to flow and for him to have good games. And it's kind of funny, as much as I was, and we were both doing this, especially in the first half, kind of ripping on Gomez's amount of turnovers. He's kind of allowed that because he's one of the few guys who can beat defenders 1v1 on the dribble. Yep. Having not looked directly through all of your player ratings yet, where did you have Rasmus Schuler's game?
I think I had him around a 6 or a 7, because and again, he did so well, and we've talked about it, you and I, multiple times this season. He does such a good job of his midfield positioning and his defensive responsibilities. And the stats backed this up. It's something. It was a notion I had coming out of the game that his passing had been kind of substandard, but I did want to verify it, and I went back and checked, and he had numerous turnovers from his pass selection, and so that's one of the reasons his number was downgraded.
You had him at a 6. Provide timely tackles throughout, but it would be beneficial to his team to see him add a bit more cutting edge in his forward passes. Yep.
That's interesting, because that differs from what I'm looking at on the box score from after the game, which I want to look at a little bit here. Yeah, so the box score from after the game had Rasmus Schuler attempted 57 total passes, which was tied for the most on the team on the day, and completed them at a 91.2% accuracy rate.
Yep. So this is a great discussion on soccer stats, because as the defensive mid in that pairing, he has amongst the highest rate of anyone on the team to have the simplest passes. So that number is so boosted because so many of those passes came from just passing back to the goalie or passing back to the center backs. And if you look at his the stat I went with, David, that I said verified my findings, was from the Audi Player Index, and that showed that in his forward passes or in his offensive half passes, he had the most turnovers on the team.
Sam Bradford.
Yeah, and that's what the chalkboard bears out, because all of the passes that were turnovers are stuff going forward. All of them the most forward of any of the passes that he played. So that's like, if we take out the defensive third of the field, you take out about half of his successful passes. Like, that's
exactly
the problem with you just using total passes and total completion as a stat, because, like, the numbers are gaudy and good when you see 57 total passes with him and Calvo, who, like, they played a lot of passes, but a lot of them were passing it around the back, passing it up into the midfield. Not the highest degree of difficulty.
Yeah, under minimal pressure. Exactly. That's a no, I love that. Was a perfect breakdown of soccer statistics, and specifically, the dynamic between passing accuracy and how valid it can be or cannot be. And
it's one of those things, like the paperwork we get after the game is stats I have are minutes, shots on target, chances created, touches, total passes, passing accuracy, tackles, fouls won, and fouls conceded. Like, it's very, very surface level stuff.
I would even venture to call it vague.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's only so much I can take. Like, I can see that of United's 10 shots, Gomez had 3, Ramirez had 3, Quintero had 2, and Ibarra had 2. But there's no way to judge the quality of those shots other than if they were on target or not, how far away they were from, whether they were set up, how well they were defended.
Yes, precise. That's why the Audi Player Index is so fantastic. It is a great metric, and it's honestly kind of odd that it doesn't get as heralded as it does. I feel like it still flies pretty under the radar, and that's kind of surprising to me.
Yep, and it's one of those things that we've talked on and off about, like, where the next frontier for stats are, whether that's within, like, teams' internal metrics or with what people are doing in various soccer media. And the Audi Player Index is another example of, like, here are some things that you can do that might provide more detail and more specificity for things to improve, things that a player is doing well. And that's a great resource to be able to check out and find stuff out with that.
Absolutely, and just to finish the point Tom tried to make, because if we don't get a cross-sport reference, then
I'd be crushed.
Tom will be pretty uncomfortable. So, I mean, for those out there, yeah, the Schuller statistics are kind of a Sam Bradford situation where, yes, he has this incredibly high completion percentage, and it's even above
literally record-breaking accuracy.
Yeah, super far above league average, both that year and beyond. But it's because a lot of the passes are underneath and under minimal pressure or short passes. So,
yeah, I like that. That was not an analogy I would have gone with. We've got football analogies in both.
Ram Bradford. Ram Bradford.
I don't know what that reference.
St. Louis Rams. Bradford.
Oh,
yeah, St. Louis Ram. Great, Sam Bradford. That's correct, Tom.
That's good.
Moving on.
We need to not get me mad about the St. Louis Rams today. That's a sore subject.
By the way, in expansion, isn't Cincinnati? It looks like Cincinnati might be getting a team. Did that get announced?
I'm not sure if it got announced, but I think the thing that I heard
there's like a special announcement,
a major special announcement with MLS officials, like on Tuesday of this week. Which, gee, I wonder what that could be. I'm not entirely sure. It was like when Minnesota United had their big press conference about the Gold Cup last week, and then there kept just being more and more like, one person spoils it's the Gold Cup, then another one says it's the Gold Cup. Then I get there and there's Gold Cup branding everywhere. And it's like, is it really a surprise? Like, I think we know what the announcement is, guys.
But St. Louis and then Miami would be the next two kind of stand, right? Because Beckham's trying to put a team in Miami.
Yeah.
So I think, because Miami, I think is, I know they had some kind of naming thing come out in the last couple of weeks, so I think that like Cincinnati and Miami seem like the next two for sure. And then I continue to think that St. Louis is right there on the border, but they're certainly a tier down in terms of like how ready they are for it, because like the stadium is still a big question, and you can get a team without having the stadium up and ready to go. But like as Minnesota has proved playing in TCF Bank Stadium for a while, but like the road's a little bit harder to see, and St. Louis FC has played at not exactly as high profile of a level as some of these other teams have. So I think that they're a little bit further down the tier list, and it might take a few years before that happens, but I do think that it's a market that's very ready for it, as I've said many times before on this podcast and many other places. Anyway, Nick, do you remember anything that happened from minutes 60 to 90 in this game?
That's a good question.
When was the fight? The fight was early, right?
It was early, and it was not a fight. It was a light scuffle.
And also, it was crap because the Montreal guy should have gotten sent off. Now that I've seen replays of it, because he kicked out at who was
Alexi. I think it was Alexi.
It was Alexi. He kicked out at Alexi while he was on the ground. The Montreal guy did. He should have been off.
Yeah.
And I think that was what Jamie Watson said on the TV broadcast. Now that I've had the chance to go back and watch some of that, and that was a crap play that Gomez should not have been as in trouble for as he was, even though it wasn't definitely a foul.
Yeah.
But it was like after the 2 goals went in, just kind of nothing happened much in this game, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. I think it's a positive from a United standpoint, right? A team that loves the idea of being able to get a shutout now and again. So for them to do that, and like we talked, one of the headline performances for me was Michael Boxall. Not only how solid he was, but to me this was the crescendo of a guy who's been playing very well over the last month, and it's so hard for that to stand out because so much of it, his play is supposed to be subtle. The things he does isn't supposed to stand out. That's the point. And if he does, he's probably not playing well. So it's been something I've been tracking, and I showed it, every game's player ratings up to this point. And last night was just the finale in some ways because he's really built up to this performance, and I felt like he was flawless last night.
Why is he hard to judge?
Because he's playing center back, and so many of his plays are just like subtle things where it's like the ball gets crossed into the box and everyone's in there, and then one guy gets his head on it, and it's like, who was that? It's
positioning and stuff. It sounds like.
Yeah, and sometimes it's just like being in the right position so that you make a guy do a pass. That's the epitome of not a sexy play. So much of his play is going to be not sexy. So it takes a keen eye to notice it. But last night, even so, he stood high above the rest, and it was good to see. And it's so huge and so magnified for Minnesota because they're about to lose their other center back and captain, Francisco Calvo.
That's exactly where I was going to go with it. Is Calvo also had a really good game last night in a lot of aspects, and you rewarded him with a good big 7 in the player ratings.
Yep.
But it amplified some of the stuff that is going to not be great about him being missing for the next month.
Yes, it's going to be really interesting, but I still think Minnesota United comes out all right. I mean, it's good to get Kallman back into the team, and honestly, like Calvo, it could be kind of a net positive in some ways because it'll give the team. You have to even be more of a unit if you're losing someone so as talented as Calvo. But honestly, like at times Calvo's errors really hurt this team. So there's where it could be a positive. Not to mention it could be a positive even if United is porous defensively while he's gone. That actually could almost be even a positive because then it just reinforces that Calvo is needed in this team, and it'll really stop criticism of him. It'll really stunt criticism of him going forward and allow him to be more confident when he returns because he'll know he's needed, and the whole team will know he's needed. And I think in a lot of as much as it's a tough situation in some ways, I actually feel like there is a lot of positive for the Loons.
Yep, I think that it provides a lot of. It provides a lot of opportunities, and the other good thing is their game schedule is not particularly heavy over this period. They have the game in Kansas City on Sunday of next week, and then they have their U.S. Open Cup opener in Cincinnati midweek. That would be 2 weeks from about 2 weeks from now, I think. And then they don't have an MLS game again until the 23rd of June. So there's a pretty decent gap in here for whether it's some time off, whether it's some good training, for things to get set right for Calvo's absence and for his return. So that I think that it's like the World Cup does this to every team in the MLS. Most teams in the MLS will be missing at least 1 or 2 people for the World Cup. So everybody will have adjustments to make. It just happens that Minnesota United's captain is the one that goes, and that comes with the different issues. I'm interested to see. Adrian Heath talked a little bit about Michael Boxall taking the captain's armband next week, which I know was discussed at training in the future, so it's not really a surprise. And just what will happen if that will impact his game at all. Like what if the captain's armband will do anything to him? It's not really like it doesn't make any substantive difference in his role on the field other than the coin toss. But like if a player excels into the armband, right? Like
yeah,
I don't know. It's a weird thing to think about in soccer.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like it could be a little something, but it also could be absolutely nothing. Like everything just runs kind of status quo. There could be you could see a slight uptick in his performance as a result, or a slight downtick because the responsibility is a bit more for him. But I think it'll be pretty neutral.
Yep, I don't think it's a big deal. It's one of those things that it's an interesting little thing.
I think
we are obliged to talk about it.
Yeah. And I think maybe one of the positives would be that like that again. Let's say while Calvo's gone, the defense for whatever reason, like three clean sheets in a row. What does that mean without Calvo? But then now maybe Boxall, right? He's had some reps as leader and captain, and so if you don't want to play Calvo, or if you want to play Calvo somewhere else, or if things are going rough with Calvo, you have Boxall as another leader, and that's only a positive for United.
Yep, and it mixes stuff up and gives some more openings. Which if the depth of the squad can hold up, which has obviously been a question, that will help. Speaking of the squad depth, it was a welcome sight to see Tyrone Mears back in the starting lineup. What did you think of his performance?
I thought he was super good. It's been a while, right? He's only been with the team this season, and he was the starter in the beginning of the season. But it's been quite a while since we've seen him, and you kind of forget his value. But man, I was impressed. He's obviously, as a veteran, provides such calmness on the ball. Like he just exudes it, and it's so helpful to this team. He also did such a good job early in this game, as we talked about previously. United starts very slowly, and Montreal's getting some of their best chances early in this game, and a lot of them were coming to his side, and he handled them very, very well, and that was huge. Right, that's a situation where United has panicked and been beaten comically, and then they're behind it. And he was put on trial right away, and he handled it very well. He also provides such a nice aspect going forward because he might serve the best crosses of anyone on the team, and to have
that's correct.
And to have that is just it's a really, really nice element.
Yeah, like it was. We talked before the game about the absence of Jerome Tierson maybe not being the best thing for the team, but Mears is
Mike, you talking about my elevator?
He got signed for a reason.
You talking about my elevator, buddy?
I am talking about your elevator a little bit.
Can't ride without him.
Well, I just got to the game when I got there, and we took the elevator up, so we were chatting about his injury. Like briefly, it was just kind of funny. He's super nice. He's like super nice guy. I didn't tell you this last night, Dave, but actually, and then on my way down when I left the game, I took the elevator down with Manny Lagos, sporting director of Minnesota United.
I think
you just need to be riding the elevators all day.
Yeah, you could be a guy in a chair punching in the button.
I'll be the Adam Schefter of Minnesota United if I just stay on the elevator.
I think
if you just never leave the elevator, you're good.
I think frankly they're riding the elevator with you. They're like Nick's getting in. Exactly. Nick's getting in. Someone go.
That's good stuff. No, I obviously I covered United for 2 years in the NASL, and Lagos, now the sporting director, i.e. the general manager of the team, he was the head coach, and I hadn't seen him in like a year and a half. He said, "Hey Nick, how you doing, man?" I couldn't believe he remembered me. Actually, it was surprising. Yeah. So kudos to Manny. Good guy alert.
There you go.
Go with whatever you're going to say here in a sec. But my last point on Mears was, given how he played and how he's played at other times in the season, I actually think, and I like what Eric Miller's provided. He's clearly a stable guy and a consistent guy. And again, slight credit again to Heath for acquiring him, because it's the outside back depth is one of the weaker was one of the weaker parts of the team, and it's clearly needed. And so, Miller's provided stability there, and that's great. But to me, upside-wise, the best pairing on the outside of the defense might be Mears on the right and Tyson on the left, right as it stands. That's my feeling right now, at least.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about that, because obviously we have to look forward to the Kansas City game a little bit. We know there won't be Calipo, and we assume Brent Coleman's just going to slot right in there next to Boxall. And if Tieson is healthy, then that provides the question. Eric Miller's still kind of working himself into game shape after not playing the early part of the season. You might go with Tieson and Mears as your starting outside backs, is what you're saying, which I can see.
Yes, I would. Well, in a vacuum, everyone healthy. Yes, Tieson on the left right now, and then Mears on the right would be manager Nick's decision. That's what I would do.
Manager Nick's decision. Do you foresee? It seems like the front six is kind of set at this point. Like without any injuries, it's going to be. It's the front six is the front six for the foreseeable future. Do you agree?
To me, there is a little bit of a battle between Dunlady and Gomez still. Gomez he saved it by having a really good second half performance. But we don't know him yet. We don't know what his regular performance would be.
The broadcast was fixated on him, I feel like. Just listening to it. Did you feel that way, Naylor?
I didn't listen to the entire thing. So I trust your input over mine on that one.
Yeah, I felt like his name kept on coming up, and there was a little bit of a microscope on him, at least in that game.
Well,
yeah.
If the broadcast had been Nick and I's conversation in the press box, you would have felt very similar. I'll put it that way.
True.
We talked a lot about Gomez's performance.
Yes, especially in the first half, and so to me, it's still shaking out. And Dunlady, right? Dunlady's a second-year guy. So he's still kind of like we're shaking out what he's going to be and where he'll function. But you'd like to think you want to get him on the field, and the position that would make the most sense. And I've been saying it for a while. It would to me is outside mid, and obviously with Miguel being one of the best players the last month, it's not him, and so it's between him and Gomez. So to me, that's a really interesting. And I think if you're Heath. In fairness, you have to give Dunlady chances too, and so that's what you're asking about the front six and what that's always going to look like, and that's one of the biggest questions that comes to my mind is.
It kind of leads to an aspect of the game that didn't end up mattering that much last night, which was Adrian Heath's substitutions, which I thought were interesting. Like the substitution of Colin Martin on for Christian Ramirez to shift to a 4-3-3 was the most defensive sub I've ever seen Adrian Heath make ever.
Yeah, but it didn't last. That was interesting. It didn't even last. Well, I guess the 4-3-3 did last the rest of the game, and you could argue that he's doing that because he found success when he switched to a 4-3-3 a couple weeks back. So maybe that's what we're noticing now, though, is that's probably a trend that he's going to go with that when he wants to hold on to leads. Is the 4-3-3?
He's okay playing notionally without a striker, or at best with Quintero as the striker. It's kind of playing strikerless at that point. Kind of,
but it didn't even last. But remember, it didn't last that long because it was only 5 or so minutes, and then Dunlady ended up
before
coming on.
Dunlady came on. Yeah. It's just one of those. It's an interesting wrinkle that was more, I guess, way more defensive than I expected to see from Heath, even with trying to hold a lead.
Yeah, I think, from a scouting standpoint, I'd say that's going to be. It looks like that's going to be his go-to. Should United be holding on to a lead, he's going to want to switch to that 4-3-3. And I think it's a good call, especially to take Ramirez off, because then you have that ability to counter a bit more.
Because there are plenty of these games where Ramirez kind of feels unessential when United don't have the ball, just because he's not getting that much done on the defensive end. He's not tracking back just because that's not as much of his bag of tricks. And that's okay. So if he's not going to do that, get somebody on who's going to be in the pitch. And I thought Colin Martin in his few minutes on the pitch in the late game was pretty good.
Yeah. And he had been good in his cameos earlier in the season, but when he started is when he had that his worst performance, which was really unfortunate because that's when the microscope's extra on you.
Yeah, but it seems like this role as the bench kind of stopper, if you will, is not a bad fit for him.
Yes. It seems like cameos suit him right now. I would agree with that. And again, back to the 4-3-3 just briefly, it does provide the dual function of adding a body to the midfield and then making your attack even faster. So there's two functions that switching that 4-3-3 provides for Heath.
So the expectation going into Kansas City on Sunday night is that Kallman slots into the defense and probably no other changes in the starting lineup other than that just like-for-like change from Calvo for Kallman positionally.
Yeah. And that are you asking me?
I
or
think that just makes sense.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, that makes plenty sense. And like, and I'm not really joking, I'm being kind of serious. When I talked to T. Ison in the elevator, I asked him how he was feeling, and he was like hopefully back soon, but like he sounded skeptical that he'd be able to be back.
Well, and
by the
with
next
the Kansas City game being their last MLS game for like 2.5 weeks, if he's out for this game, he'll be okay. Like,
which maybe is the smartest thing to do. Play it safe.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that's where we're at. How do you feel about Kansas City away?
Well, real quick, just before we move on from the lineup, one other point I want to make is again, one of the big takeaways from this game, and it was one of the bigger takeaways from was it the Sporting KC game?
The draw
yes,
with Kansas City in the previous game, yeah.
Was one of the big things to pull from that game was how much Ibson's absence impacted the team, and for me, this was the second part of that series was last night's game that only proved that further, having Ibson back, because it showed everything that he provides and how well the team can tick, particularly with their possession play when he's around. So from a manager standpoint, from a lineup standpoint, when you think about depth, I feel like we talked about the defense. I feel like it's more solidified with depth, with everything else, just there's kind of depth. But center mid, specifically Ibson, but with center mid, with Schuller, having missed a game recently too, that's where this team feels the weakest. And that's where, and Heath said after the game, right, how interesting was it after this win, after a decent run of form? What did Heath say during the press conference last night, David? He referenced again bringing talent in and acquiring players. Pretty obscure. Given the situation.
Yeah, pretty aggressively, too. It was, we're evaluating and we know that where we're going to need to add talent when the window next opens. And that was not necessarily what I was expecting to hear after this game.
Exactly.
Makes sense, though, with what he's looking at.
Exactly. And so those last two games, Ibson being absent for one and then playing well in the next, to me, and then Heath saying that, to me, that screams, just absolutely shouts that United will and should use their next designated player signing on a center mid.
Yep, that seems to make a lot of sense to me. Okay, Kansas City, how do you feel? Are you scared?
I'll just tell everything I just told you guys. I'll tell Manny Lagos next time.
Yeah, please
we're in the elevator together. So just see if he and I are on the same page on that. I think it's going to be a loss, and I think that's totally okay because it's on the road. I think they can go in and have some confidence because they were able to hold them 1-1, and it's like, why not? Why can't we do that again? Especially, again, like we just pointed out, if Ibson's back and if the team has a bit more confidence, as they should. So I think best possible result is a draw of some sort and United stealing a point away, but I think to expect that would be a fool's errand.
And especially with Calvo being the change that he is, Boxall and Kallman haven't really had the chance to play together that much on the big stage of the season. So maybe there are some communication errors that might not be there just because of fluency. So it's like you have worries about the defense, and we saw that the offense had its moments against Kansas City, but it was not consistent. And the pressure that Kansas City put out when Minnesota had the ball really messed with them. So I'm curious to see if United deal any better with how Kansas City is defending them and the pressure that they put on, because that was a problem for United, especially in the second half of the game 2 weeks ago. We get to see these two matchups so close together, so we've got a memory of exactly what happened in the Minnesota edition of this matchup, and it leads to some points to watch that we can be better informed of than we were previously.
Yeah, and I mean, and the word from Heath is that Sporting KC presses even better when they're at home. So that's a scary thought if you're the Loons. But I think having Ibson back is huge and could change the dynamic a bit.
Yeah, we talked about that, like watching the game. Is he's just a guy that can escape sometimes of that, and that just you need an escape valve like that from the pressure just to get you some time.
He could, yeah, seriously, and he can do it in like. And it's funny at times, or it's really skillful at times. But he's got like numerous ways he can do it. He can be just the functional center mid that he needs to be. Receive and pass. He can dribble out of weird situations. He can make a really funky touch or play that you wouldn't expect. That helps the team in a tight spot. He'll draw that foul that he's trademarked for, where he does something super goofy and flops extra funny. He can hit extra, the long pass that's needed in certain situations.
All of these things can be encompassed under the verb to Ibson something.
Yes,
all of these are Ibsoning.
Yes, absolutely they are. So he can do it in a myriad of ways, and it's very unique to him and the team. So
cool. Yep. So that's about all I've got. Tom, are we about at a place where we can wrap up on time?
45 minutes, perfect. Just perfectly executed. Perfect. It was a good elevator ride.
Perfect time. Perfect time to wrap up the show, and then we can get started on our Loris Karius podcast, right, David?
Oh gosh. I cracked a joke about that, and then Ramirez's goal had some goalkeeping snafus too.
Right.
So I couldn't go too hard on that. So what I was going to say before Nick made me have a goalkeeping howler, the Carius, is that ZoneCoverage.com is sending me to Kansas City to cover this game on Sunday of next week. So I will be there at the game at whatever sporting park is called nowadays. And that will be very exciting and a good opportunity to see. It's a national TV game. It's on Fox Sports 1 Sunday night. I think it'll be the only MLS game going at the time, and we'll see what NBA playoff game it's on top of, because that'll be a disaster. It'll be during the NBA Finals, so if the NBA is off, that'll be the show. Minnesota United will be the big game on Sunday night.
Well, don't forget about the Stanley Cup, bro. Come on, bro.
Come on, Naylor.
Come on, bro.
Yeah, Ovi.
Why don't you just scream, "I wasn't born in Minnesota"?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm literally doing this podcast from my home state of Iowa. So
exactly.
Oh, home of the Iowa Wild, the Waterloo Blackhawks, the Cedar Rapids.
If you're not shouting out the Cedar Rapids Rough Riders first, you can get out of here, Tom.
Sioux City Musketeers.
Oh my gosh. If you name one more city in Iowa, that'll be
Dubuque Fighting Saints.
More than I've ever heard of.
The Dubuque Fighting Saints. Yep, that's right.
My goodness. If you name one more Iowa city, I'm gonna puke all over you.
Iowa City Hawkeyes.
Okay, Iowa City. There you go.
Oh my gosh.
So we've gone sufficiently off the rails at this point. It's time to get out of here. So thank you for listening. Read our stuff on ZoneCoverage.com. Subscribe to the podcast. Do all the good stuff. Check out our membership program. It's a really good program, and you get to a lot of good stuff from a lot of good writers and a lot of good sports, including hockey, I guess. And with that said, I am David Naylor. You can find me on Twitter at PropTeeter, for Nic Hallett at Prince Hallett, and Tom Schreier at TSchreier3. This has been the Minnesota Soccer Podcast. We will see you guys next week.
Adios.